Hey, thank you so much for the introduction. So I am Aaron Bassett, as you heard there. I do have ADHD. So this talk's going to be about some of the things that I've had to, adjustments I've had to make to my work life in order to be able to focus and to get my job done, essentially. And that job is, I work for a place called Nexmo. I'm not going to give you like the entire sales pitch. That's not what I'm up here to do today. If you're interested in what we do, we do have a booth out there. What I do want to point out, though, is I wouldn't be here without them. Like, not just being able to do this conference, being able to do the job that I do. Like, I'm very supported by them, and in fact, I do have a mental health issue. They're very supportive about me coming out to the community and talking about having a mental health issue. So, you know, they're paying me to be here today, to come up here to talk to you about mental health and not about what we do or what products we sell. So I'd really appreciate it if you do have a couple extra minutes to come find us in the booth and find out more about us. Okay, so who am I? So this is me. I think I was maybe about like 5 years old in this photo. Yes, I was incredibly cute. No, I have no idea what happened either. I had a pretty normal childhood. But I grew up during the 80s. And in the 80s, we had the best music, we had the best fashion, we had the best fucking shoulder pads. But unfortunately, we didn't have the best mental health care. We didn't have the best ways of identifying developmental issues in kids in schools. So unfortunately, I did go untreated or undiagnosed for ADHD for 34 years. You know, so the majority of my adult life, majority of my career, I've developed, I've built my career. I've run through so many different jobs while not knowing I had ADHD. So I've had to kind of, yes, now I'm medicated. It's awesome. I love it. But before then, I had to try and develop additional coping mechanisms. So for those people who don't know what ADHD is or how it affects you, I've got like a really short video I just want to play first.
The prefrontal cortex, PFC, is the cerebral cortex which covers the frontal part of the frontal lobe, the brain region that's been implicated in planning complex cognitive behaviors or personality expression, decision-making, and moderating social behavior. The basic activity of the brain region is considered to be an orchestration of thoughts and actions in accordance with internal goals. The most typical psychological term for functions carried out by the prefrontal cortex area is executive function. Executive function relates to the abilities to differentiate among conflicting thoughts, determine good and bad, better and best, same and different, future consequences of current activities, working toward a defined goal, prediction of outcomes, expectations based on actions, and social control. That is, the ability to suppress urges that, if not suppressed, could lead to socially unacceptable outcomes. The frontal cortex supports concrete rule learning, while more anterior regions along the rostral caudal axis of the frontal cortex support rule learning at a higher level of abstraction.
Okay, so that's kind of a bit of an overview then of what the prefrontal cortex is. And in ADHD, your prefrontal cortex doesn't develop at the same rate as somebody who's neurotypical. So the image up there, that's showing essentially a comparison between the mass of the prefrontal cortex in somebody who is neurotypical and somebody who has ADHD. So the glowing areas there is where we see a difference in mass. So essentially my prefrontal cortex isn't as developed as somebody who would have a neurotypical brain. And that sounds pretty awful, and it does kind of really impact your day-to-day life. It does have some benefits, however. I love this quote: "The good part about having a mental disorder is having a valid reason for all the stupid things we do because we have a damaged prefrontal cortex." I would be lying if I didn't say it every now and again. I go, sorry, ADHD is an excuse. It also does mean as well that your prefrontal cortex is also what is impaired whenever you're drunk. So having ADHD is basically like being slightly drunk all the time, and not just because I'm Irish. It also, as you saw in the video, it affects a bunch of stuff, including your social control. So if I can manage not to break the code of conduct, then none of you have any excuse. One of the other things it does impact as well is dopamine. So dopamine is this. Your dopamine is essentially your brain's reward system. It's this way of saying, you know, good job. You know, anytime you go to the gym or you take off a Jira ticket or you do something where your brain goes, hey, this is going to help your survivability, you get a nice little kick of dopamine. You know, and dopamine is what helps you to start to build good habits. You know, so you get used to having this kick of dopamine. You get your little fix, and you want to do the same thing again to get another fix, and so on and so forth. And people with ADHD, unfortunately, we don't produce dopamine in the same way as normal people do, so we don't have that same reward system. I also have a, oh gosh, what's the actual technical term for it? Major depressive disorder, or depression, as everybody calls it. And that's basically caused by lack of dopamine as well. So anything that you're trying to do where you're supposed to be getting this, like, you know, nice kind of kick from your brain that goes, hey, good job, it's a little bit harder when you don't have a prefrontal cortex. So you read all these how to be successful books, and I haven't come across one that says, you know, to be successful, be flaky, have bad time management, you know, forget what you're doing, work on the wrong thing, you know, all the stuff that the prefrontal cortex is supposed to control and supposed to help you do. I don't have that, so, you know, being successful based upon the outcomes in these, you know, self-help books is never really going to be an option for me, you know, and for most people, defining success can be different. You know, some people it's like success for them is their salary, is their remuneration, it's how much they earn. You know, they're all about those dollar bills, yo. I know it's an old meme. I'm also old. I like it. Get over it. It's fine. For some people, it's maybe power or success in the workplace. You know, they want to move up the corporate ladder, and that's how they view their own success. Hopefully, for some people, they view success as being able to help others. You know, for me, how I find my success in business is just avoiding being bored. You know, for me, that's my biggest indicator. If I'm currently feeling that I'm bored in a job, then I know that I'm not being successful, neither for myself or for the company I'm working for. I'll give you kind of like a little story about just how often I do switch jobs. Everybody here kind of is in tech probably, or at least tech adjacent. You know that normally you start a new job, first thing they do is they give you the t-shirt, they give you the hoodie, they give you the baseball cap, you know, all branded, turn you into that giant walking billboard, you know. My friends used to joke that I really must dislike clothes shopping, because as soon as a t-shirt would get tatty, I would just go get another job. Big shout out to Nexmo. They gave me 2 hoodies when I started. They've doubled my life at that job. But yeah, for me, it's like I just want to avoid getting bored. And what I mean by getting bored is I want to hit these flow states. You know, if I'm not focused on what I'm doing, then my attention's going to be all over the place. I'm not going to feel fulfilled. I'm going to be bored, essentially. So it's a really interesting book by a guy called Cal Newport that I've read. That I've skimmed, let's be honest. I've got ADHD. It's really hard to finish an entire book. But in this book, he talks about this thing called deep work. And for him, deep work is these 3 elements. You know, so deep work equals time times focus. You know, so if we look at this equation, we can't really change the time part of it. You know, some people, we sometimes try to do it. You know, we'll hit crunch period and we'll increase our hours from a 40-hour week to a 60-hour week. You know, we're trying to make the T side of that equation larger. But it's unsustainable. Really, the T is fixed. You know, so if we want to increase the amount of deep work, of high-quality work that we're producing, then the only thing that really that's within our control is focus. You know, we need to increase the amount of focus that we have. That's actually one of the things I really hate about the description for ADHD. You know, it's attention deficit disorder. If anything, I don't have a deficit of attention. I've got way too freaking much attention. I just don't have the ability to focus that attention on where it's required. You know, sometimes I'll not be able to focus it at all, and I'll get nothing done. Other times I'll focus it on like the world's best researched Reddit comment. You know, and it's trying to figure out where that focus should be. And if I'm constantly fighting with myself about what I should be focusing on or how I should be changing my focus, then eventually I'm going to run out of spoons. For people who are not familiar with the spoons metaphor, it actually came out from people who have chronic pain. You know, so it was a metaphor to explain how they got through the day. So at the start of the day, you have a certain number of spoons. Say you have 12 spoons. Okay, and as you progress through your day and you complete tasks, that costs you a spoon. You know, so you get up in the morning, there's a spoon. You have a shower, that's a spoon. You go to work, that's a spoon. You know, all these small things you do throughout the day, you have to pay for each of them in spoons, which essentially is willpower. You know, it's for each thing that you do that you're forcing yourself to complete, it's going to sap a little bit of that willpower. Now, each person has a fixed amount of spoons that they can spend each day. Sometimes you can borrow some spoons from tomorrow, but eventually you have to pay them back and sell your books. And it's, as well as spoons, you know, creativity is not a faucet. We can't just turn it on anytime that we want. You know, sometimes you're not going to be productive. Sometimes it's just not going to happen. You know, you can sit there and you can stare at the screen for as long as you want. and nothing's going to happen because it's not a faucet. It's not something that you can just turn on anytime you want to. There's a lot of factors that go into being productive and being focused. And sometimes you're just going to have to go, hey, it's not going to happen for me today. I'm going to go do something else. I'm going to go walk the dog. I'm going to go watch a trashy TV show or play some Xbox or do something, anything to stop you sitting there burning spoons while you try to turn the faucet on. But unfortunately, what we actually end up doing is what he calls shallow work. So in the absence of deep work, what we tend to fall back on is shallow work. So shallow work is where you're just doing anything to appear to be productive to the other people in the office. We're so conditioned now to feel that we have to be seen to be productive all the time that we actually create work. We send those emails, we write that memo, we schedule a fucking meeting. We do anything that makes it appear to the other people in our offices that we're being productive that day, when actually we're not doing anything. We're just burning spoons, we're spinning our wheels, we're not getting anything done. And it's like the expectation of that is throughout our entire industry. So this is a tweet, it was just before Christmas, I think, 2017. Nathan Hubbard, for anybody who's not heard that name before, he's Stanford educated. He was a VP at Twitter. He was CEO of Ticketmaster. This is somebody who's at the pinnacle of business. And this is what he was saying. He's whatever you're hustling for, take note. Most companies are shut down until 2018. So he's saying this is Christmas period. All companies are closed now until 2018. That means you get 2 extra weeks to outwork your competition. That's 3.8% more time. For perspective, Usain Bolt won his gold medals running 1.2% faster. These 2 weeks are a gift. Get to work. It's fucking Christmas, dude. Give it a break. Seriously, we're so ingrained now that we have to be productive all the time that you can't even take a break at Christmas. No, this is not how we're supposed to be. This is not how we're going to be productive either. So you get that extra 2 weeks at Christmas where none of your vendors or anybody else is available, so you're probably not being very productive as it is, and then suddenly you're burnt out in January. No, take the 2 weeks off. Go relax. Thankfully, not everybody sees it this way. This is another quote from Jason Fried, the co-founder of Basecamp. I love it. He's like, workaholics aren't heroes. They don't save the day. They just use it up. And for me, that really sums up this whole idea of shallow work. Just because somebody's there in the office all day, every day, doesn't mean that they're actually being more productive. It just means that they're using the day up. For my own personal experience, I once worked for an ed tech company, and I had a 2-hour commute each way every day. And I was getting really, really burnt out on the work. It was really, really difficult work, lots of technical debt. Everything was running way behind, but I still needed to be seen to be there every day. I felt if I didn't come in, be sat in that seat, I was letting the team down. And this is not an exaggeration. I once came in and spent 8 hours staring at that. That's actually my literal terminal. Isn't a unicorn cute? But I sat for 8 hours. I didn't go for lunch. I didn't get up to get a drink. I did nothing. I sat and I stared at that screen, at that blinking cursor for 8 hours, willing myself to be productive. But I was so burned out that I just couldn't concentrate. There was no way at all that I was going to get anything done. In fact, I wasn't being successful. I wasn't helping the company's mission or anything like that. In fact, I was a detriment to my team. By sitting there, I was part of that sprint, which meant that I was supposed to be taking on some of the tickets, which meant that actually our burn down charts would have been better if I wasn't there. All I was doing was just keeping a seat warm. But we tend to focus on the shallow work because deep work is hard. It's difficult to get into these flow states. So if something's difficult and there's something easier we can be doing, sometimes we just take the easy route. And it becomes self-perpetuating. You get into this habit of, that's what I do when I come to work. I come in and I send the email, or I schedule a meeting, or I write the memo, or I do any of these other things that actually really aren't productive and are not benefiting me or the company. Okay, so how can we improve our focus then? How can we get into these states of flow? There's a bunch of different techniques that people use. So this is a Pomodoro timer. Essentially, it's a kitchen timer that you set for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever time period you want to use. And whenever the timer goes off, you take a 5-minute break. You set it for 5 minutes, goes off, you take your break. When it goes off again, you set it back for 20, and so on and so forth. Doesn't work for me. I'm building in a distraction every 15 minutes. I've barely opened up my editor and remembered which file I'm working on by the start of 15 minutes. and then this thing goes bing, and suddenly I'm like, oh crap, right, I've got to take a break for 5 minutes, and I come back off my break, and I go, what was I doing? Oh yeah, I was on Hacker News, wasn't I? No, I was on Twitter. Yeah, it just doesn't work. I spend the entire time just trying to remember what I was doing rather than actually getting anything done. Then you have get things done. It's another really popular one. Get things done is a workflow that you go through anytime a task comes in where you're basically going, can I work on this now, or does this need additional information? And you follow in the workflow and you put it into these little buckets to get work done later. And that's essentially the problem with it for me, is just putting things into little buckets that I will then totally forget about. The only thing I actually really like from this is the can you do it in under 2 minutes? And if you can, you should just do it there and then. Last time I gave this talk, I said that I follow that rule. Now that my colleagues are in the audience, I'm going to say I try to follow that rule. But yeah, that's the only part I really take away from this that kind of helps for me, is that if it's under 2 minutes, just try and do it there and then. Then we have bullet journals. Bullet journals are excellent. I have no idea if they actually work as for like to-do lists and stuff, but they look beautiful. These things are like an art form. I don't know if is this person's job, is just to make really pretty notebooks? I don't think I would ever have time to get anything else done from this. I'd be like, oh, you know what? I'm gonna get my color scheme together. Then I'm gonna do some stationery shopping. I'm gonna get some new color. Oh, it's gonna be awesome. And I would never get any work done at all. But they are beautiful. Like, they really are. If you're somebody who can actually use one of these, I'm so jealous. I would love to be able to do that, but unfortunately I can't. Oh, one thing I did discover is that they're now not called bullet journals. Apparently they're bujos. Like freaking J-Lo or Kim Ye. I don't think I'm hipster enough for those. Eat the frog. Another task management one that's pretty popular. Idea behind it is you pick your worst task and you do that first thing in the day. So it's like eating a frog. If you eat a frog first thing in the morning, there's nothing worse is going to happen to you that day. It's actually probably one of the better ones for me because I am quite productive in the morning, so I do try to tackle some of my more difficult tasks when I'm most productive. And that's you'll find a lot through this talk, is I'll be talking about things that work for me. And really what I'm saying is these are things that I've discovered over time. I'm not trying to change the way in which my mind works. Instead, I'm trying to change the way that I work to fit the way that my mind works. And that's probably what I would advise most people. Because part of the organization, for people with ADHD, organization becomes unsustainable task because organizational systems work in linearity, importance, and time. So all the systems we looked at there, I can take little bits and pieces from them and I adjust them to the way in which my mind works, rather than trying to adjust my mind into those different systems. Because really the only system that actually works for me is these. They're visual, they're easy to create, so I can just write my task down straight away. I can immediately see what I should be working on and what I should be doing. And they're still stuck on my monitor at home because I travel about 75% of the time. So everyone's got its downsides. Okay, so the other thing then we can do to really kind of help ourselves get these flow states is our working environment. Now, for anybody who doesn't recognize it, the background of the slide is actually this is Facebook. So this is their actual engineering floor. I'm actually finding it difficult to concentrate standing here knowing this is on the screen behind me. It's that busy. That looks like a hellscape for me. There's open plan offices and then there's this. I would get absolutely nothing done there. There's just so much distraction, there's so much noise, there's so much probably movement and things that it just wouldn't work for me at all. And to be honest, open plan offices don't work for many people. And we've known this for a while. So this is a quote from a BT futurologist saying that the trouble with open plan offices is they're a one-size-fits-all model which actually fits nobody. For anybody who doesn't know, BT is British Telecom, a publicly funded company which is now private. Thank you, Margaret Thatcher. But they do some good research every now and again. Some of the research is Steelcase. I'm just going to read some of these, I remember the figures. So a company called Steelcase polled 1,000 plus office workers. They found that 95% of them said that having privacy in the workplace was important. 41% felt they had privacy. So the vast majority of people say that privacy is important, and less than half actually feel that they have it. 31% of the people polled said they had to leave work to get anything done. Does that not seem insane, that you would set up this office for people to come to do work, and then they have to leave it to actually get anything done. Most people said they lost an average of 86 minutes per day to interruptions, to breaks in their concentration. So if we take that 86 minutes per day and we multiply it out over like a regular work year, that's 10 weeks over the course of a year. 2.5 months of unproductive time, just from those little micro interruptions every day. Canada Life find that if people in open plan offices take 70% more sick days. We've all seen it. There's that one asshole who comes into the office with a cold or a flu and gives it to everybody. Like, it happens. And again, it's actually, that was disingenuous. I shouldn't have been mean to that person, because the reason they come into the office is because of the whole shallow work, and we have to be seen to be productive. Again, it's so ingrained in us that if we're not there bum in seat, then, we're not getting anything done. We're not being productive. In fact, you even need to have an open plan office. If you're working in an office that's got one other person in it, your chance of taking a sick day increases by 50%. We are filthy, dirty people, and we spread our diseases really quickly. Queensland University of Technology Institute of Health and Biomedical Innovation did a test where they found that people in open plan offices had 90% higher levels of stress. They felt they had higher levels of conflict, and they had higher blood pressure. Like, this is not even affecting just our mental health. This is actually affecting our physical health, just working in open plan offices. In fact, we don't even need to be in an open plan office. Cornell University did a study where they just played the noise of an open plan office to people for 3 hours. Didn't actually make them work in the office themselves. They just played the background noise that they would hear from a regular open plan office. And their levels of adrenaline spiked. That's your fight or flight response. And not only did they notice that they obviously were feeling a lot more stressed with just the noise going on, but 50% of the people studied didn't make any ergonomic adjustments to their workplace. So they were so distracted just by the noise that they didn't even realize that they were uncomfortable in the way that they were sitting. So this has a huge impact. And it's not something this is like new studies. Like, we've known about open plan offices, and we've used open plan offices for a while. This is one from 1896. This is the counting room in Cambridge. 1900, the long room in Wellington. 1902, this is an architecture and interior design firm. 1939, this is probably actually the only open plan office where I would enjoy working. This is Frank Lloyd Wright's Cathedral of Work. So this is probably the pinnacle of open plan offices. It's designed to look like a forest canopy, with lots of natural light coming through it. Each of the tables, or each of the desks that we see there, were individually designed to maximize the space, but while still allowing kind of free movement between departments. Like, if you're deciding for your business that you're actually going to go co-located and you're going to have an open plan office, this is what you need to be aiming for. If you can't manage to do this, and just don't. Because we get lots of these copies, and normally when you make a copy of something, like, it's just not going to turn out anywhere near as good. 1968, Henry Miller came along with the Action Office. Well, he likes to say he came along with the Action Office. He actually stole it from a German firm where they called it organic offices. Action offices are this concept that you can take kind of modular furniture and you change the office based upon what you need at that time. So you can create different pods that people work in, or you can create little breakout areas, or you can chop and change it. It's pretty, I would say that most people have worked in an office that looks like this. They all come out of like the same IKEA catalog. They're pretty much like cookie cutter. They're better than what we had before. They're not quite cubicle farms, but they still have a little bit of privacy. But there's issues there with privacy. There's issues there with noise. There's issues there with distractions, etc. And even companies like where I work for Nexmo. We recently did a redesign of our office. It is beautiful. We've got these lovely areas where people can sit and watch films or have meetups. And we've got little cubby holes for people to get away if they do need some quiet time. Even areas that should be noisy, like whenever are doing our stand-ups in Scrum, we've got noise cancelling curtains and stuff, and then they plunk all the engineer desks down in neat little rows. It's even companies who are trying to do it really, really well, they're going to make some mistakes. That's why this is actually my favorite desk. It's because I have full control here. If it's too hot, I can open the window. If it's too cold, I can turn on the heating. Okay, so I don't get foosball tournaments. I don't have a fridge full of Sprite and stuff. But I do have full control of what's there. I have a second laptop that all it's doing is showing Arrow, the TV series. The ADHD part of my brain is sometimes like a small child, It's just sitting there like ask me constant questions, looking for input while I'm trying to get some work done. So like any good parent, I just turn on Netflix and just plunk it down in front of it and ignore it. These trashy TV shows are just the right level of like stimulus without actually being distracting. They're great. I've gone through the entire Marvel universe doing this. It's fantastic. But the whole point is I've got control. If I want to dance about in my zombie freaking slippers, I can. This is all stuff I can't do in an open plan office. Well, I could, but probably only once. But here I control that environment, and it makes such a difference. Okay, zombie slippers aside, things like being able to control the temperature, being able to control the light, being able to to take a break and not feel guilty about it whenever you need to. So if you want to go play some Xbox or watching TV or whatever, all these minor adjustments are things that will distract you and will prevent you from hitting flow. It may seem like a very, very small thing to be able to ensure that your temperature is set just the way that you want. But if anybody's ever tried to work in an environment where it's too hot or too cold, it's incredibly distracting. You need to remove all this external stimulus that has potential to distract you from what you actually want to do. The second thing then is routine. So once we get our area set up the way we want it, we're removing all our barriers to getting into flow. The next thing then is routine. Is treating your brain that this is work time now. This is when I should be getting into flow. This is when I should be concentrating. For me, this is kind of my optimum. So I get up early. I said that's when I can concentrate the best, so I get like some work done. Between like 8 and 10 is when kind of the rest of the world is now going out to work and stuff, and it starts to get noisier. After 10 to 3, then I'm back at work again. I'm concentrating as well as I can, and then by 3 o'clock, I'm pretty much done. I'm out of spoons. I don't have any concentration left, so I don't force it. That's the time I'm going. Okay, I now recognize that this is the best times for me to work, so this is the times that I should be working. Let's not try and force it into different time slots. And then I've got like usual kind of gym and stuff like that. And part of trying to build this routine up is because, as I said, you got that whole dopamine thing and the U-rock, and without that, you've got to really be very strict about your routine yourself. If you don't have the ability to, or if you don't have the chemical kick from your brain to help you build these routines, then it's something you're going to have to be pretty strict on when doing it manually. For me, unfortunately, it's a little bit more difficult. This is all the travel I could remember from this year so far. So trying to keep this kind of schedule tends to be a bit problematic, but you do what you can. Okay, so all of this really counts upon you being able to control your environment, control when you work as well. So most people are like, well, my manager's not going to let me do that. They're going to want me in the office between 9 and 5, like sat in front of my desk, because that's obviously what a manager's job is. They're just a glorified clock-in clock, obviously. But it's not. Like a manager's job is this quote. It isn't about walking around and seeing if people are in the offices. It's about creating conditions for people to do their best work. Any good managers I worked with, that's really what they've seen their position to be. It's not about like making sure I'm actually doing my work. I'm an adult. I should be doing that myself. It's about ensuring that I have the opportunity to do the best work possible I can. And sometimes it's really easy to do that. Equipment. You see all these job ads for technical roles, and it's like, you'll get the latest MacBook. Like, that's like hiring a fireman and going, you'll get some hoses. It's a basic requirement for the job. Why is this a selling point for somewhere? And it wouldn't be a selling point unless some companies were actually nickel and diming on it and weren't paying for the best equipment. We spend so much money hiring good people, and then we put barriers up to the success because we don't want to pay $300 for a monitor. Like, come on, seriously. But then it can be managing up, as well. Sometimes, so I worked for a company once. It was a product-based company, and the CEO there used to phone the developers directly with product requests. He would skip the entirety of the product development lifecycle and just phone a developer and go, hey, I want to change this page in this way. So it was impossible to manage that situation because now suddenly all of our burn down charts meant nothing because people were getting pulled out to work on stuff that weren't within that sprint. We might as well not have had ticketing. We might as well not have had our entire QA process because suddenly everything was thrown out of whack because a page has just changed on somebody's whim. And in that situation, you try to manage up, you speak to the CEO, you explain the situation to them, and 9 times out of 10, it doesn't change. Because they're the CEO, it's their company. That's their developers sitting in those seats. If they want to speak to them, they will. And that's a very difficult situation to deal with. So what it is, I spoke to the developers, and I asked them, so the telephones on your desks, it's like, do you phone other departments? They're like, no, we get up and walk downstairs. It's a small company. They're like, okay, so do your partners or your significant others phone you at work on them? No, everybody has cellular phones. Like, why would they call the company landline and get passed through? It's like, okay, so you don't phone other departments, you don't use them for like private calls. Is there anything you do use your desk phones for? And they're like, well, yeah, sometimes the CEO phones me up and he makes demands upon my time. I was like, okay, so I got a big-ass box, and I walked around every developer's desk, and I unplugged the phone, and I put it in the box, and I set that box outside of the facilities. They were a distraction. They were of no benefit at all to any of the developers there. The only thing that they were causing them was additional stress and ruining their productivity. So I removed that distraction. And sometimes it's just thinking about that and thinking about different ways that you can overcome obstacles that may not be completely obvious to begin with, that helps you with flow as well. Okay, so we've got everybody now scattered all over the world. How do we communicate? Because communication is key for any kind of development and any kind of software development or engineering. So I sent a test message today, and I'm so glad I hit edit message and not send it now, because we're a fully distributed team. And I'm sure there'll be people in different time zones that would not have been very pleased with me if I'd woken them up just to get a screenshot for this slide. But yeah, so we use Slack an awful lot for our communication. And weirdly, we use Slack, but we use it for like asynchronous conversations a lot of time, not synchronous. And that is one of the big adjustments you'll need to have if you are going to let people work from wherever they want to work and whenever they want to work, is that you're not going to be able to get in touch with everybody as soon as you want to get in touch with them. And to be honest, that's a good thing. If we get into the habit of just being able to interrupt anybody anytime that we want, that's actually detrimental to their flow. Just because we need that answer right now does not mean we should be able to interrupt them in whatever they're doing. So moving to this asynchronous kind of conversation or conversation flow actually helps a lot. And we have lots of rooms, with very obviously serious business talks going on about like mac and cheese and stuff. Yeah, mac and cheese is serious business apparently, and Amanda will fight you if you don't agree. We also have some tools installed there, like we have Geekbot that allows us to do kind of our daily stand-ups and chat and things. It's fairly useful. Apart from it's really patronizing, it's like, yes, Geekbot has crippling self-doubt, and it's like, great, have a nice day. But it helps. Everybody's updated what people were doing. We don't need to be phoning them up all the time and finding the status of some things. Even we use it as our water cooler as well. We keep up to date because we are a remote team and we don't see each other very often, mostly just these kind of conferences. So it is kind of nice to be able to keep updated with people are getting up to. And then for projects, we use channels. We use a lot of different channels. And they're really useful because it means then that all the conversation is kept in one place, and you don't need to be a member of all the channels all the time. You can just dip in and out as you need them. So if you suddenly get added to a different project, you can load up that channel and you can get caught up on what's being discussed. And I have quite a few different ones in there. I have some that are just muted as well, and as you can see, I don't read all of them all the time, but it's a really handy way to communicate between the teams. Okay, so last thing I want to talk about then is kind of planning. So all of this stuff is best case scenario, So you're controlling when you work, you're controlling where you work, you're controlling how you work. And that's going to be fine 90% of the time, but then what about during crunch? We've all heard of crunch, that period of time before some big release or there's some deadline looming or something, and suddenly it's all hands on deck, we need to get this done right now. And during periods of crunch, then, can we just turn that creativity faucet on? I did want to mention one thing. If people have been following this whole thing about Red Dead Redemption 2, where they work 100-hour weeks, 100-hour weeks, what the fuck? How can anybody think that is in any way at all reasonable to have someone working 100-hour weeks? It's just not sustainable. They did post like a press release today whenever they got some like saying it was only for 3 weeks. Like, oh yeah, 3 weeks, that's so much better. And apparently as well, it was optional. Yeah, totally optional, I'm sure it was. And the problem is like, if we look at, so this is how productive you are during a regular 40-hour work week. And if it is tempting to go, okay, we're gonna hit crunch time, so we're gonna increase it to 60 hours. Because you are gonna be more productive. So here's like the equivalence. So it does fall off over time as you get more fatigued, then your productivity does go down. But for those first 4 and a bit weeks, you are more productive. But what we don't normally see whenever we see these kind of graphs is the fact that yes, you are more productive, but your error rate goes up as well. So I did a lot of research in a couple of different industries. Looking at different industries where they have studies on essentially error rates. So the two that were obviously had the most information available was the military and medical. Two industries where, awesome, no speaker notes. This is going to be fun. Can I change this? Perfect, thank you. Sorry, lost my timings and everything there. Panic attack. Yeah. So two industries where they've done a lot of research into error rates, medical and military. Because obviously in both of those industries, if you're starting to make mistakes, then people are going to die. The wrong people in the case of the military. And they looked at it like junior doctors. 57% of junior doctors have had or have nearly had some form of accident on the way home from their shift. After an 18-hour shift, they have their fatigue level is equivalent to a drunk driver. It's incredible the impact that just a small amount of fatigue can have on our mental capabilities. So that's our regular kind of error rate. So let's adjust it then for what they saw people start to get fatigued. So this is what your error rate would actually then become. So we can see that you have this huge spike after you've been running kind of crunch time for a few weeks, and then it starts to fall off. Now, the only reason it's actually falling off there is because you're actually writing less code. You're less productive, so you're writing less code, so you've got less errors. Your error rate is still way above what it would be before. So let's adjust our actual productivity. So let's say each error takes us a couple of hours to rectify. So now we adjusted line down a little bit. And let's be honest, if we're creating errors, we're also creating technical debt. So let's knock off a few percentage points from productivity for that as well. If you're working in the kind of company where they're going to make you run crunch for a few weeks, then they're probably not going to care if you don't write tests either. So tests are going to go, let's be honest, the first thing out of the door. If you're not writing tests and you're not writing docs either, so suddenly that 4 or 5 weeks of additional productivity you had is suddenly down to a week. Awesome. So we run a week of crunch, then we take a week off, we run a week of crunch, and we take a week. No. They discovered in the computer games industry, because who would have thought they run crunch a lot there? In the computer games industry, apparently every employee needed 2 to 3 weeks recovery time after any period of crunch time. So if you do a week of crunch, then you're going to be less productive for a fortnight to 3 weeks afterwards. So you need to really, really be sure that that's going to be a major benefit to getting something released. And again, you're probably not going to be able to produce your best work anyway, because creativity is not a faucet. You've only got so much spins, et cetera, et cetera. So the last thing you might do then is throw more people at it. This is a pretty common thing that they think we can do if you need to increase productivity, is just increase the number of people. We can't work one person into the floor, so let's work 10 instead. But what actually happens is something like this graph is what they normally say it looks like. So you add a bunch of people, productivity decreases as you have to onboard those new people, get them up to speed, and then once they're onboarded, then productivity goes back up again. What it actually tends to look like, especially if you're adding people during crunch, is a bit more like this. So you start off and then, okay, so you're running a little bit behind, so everybody's kind of a bit neutral. So you add a bunch of new people, but everybody was already stressed because it's crunch time, so they didn't really have time to onboard these new people anyway. So productivity takes a lot longer to start to recover. Starts to recover a little bit. Your project managers decide it's not recovering fast enough, and obviously it worked so well last time, let's add a bunch of more new people. So now you have people who were never fully onboarded from the last time you added new people, trying to onboard even more new people, so productivity just goes way, way down. It starts to recover a little bit again. Everybody's incredibly unhappy at this point too, because they're all stressed, and we're probably writing a ridiculous code that's incredibly ugly because nobody really knows what's going on because we've added so many new people that we don't have enough people to train anybody. And in about kind of week 10, 11, there'll be somebody on the team, probably somebody who's been there from the start, he'll just get so freaking fed up that there'll be this major heroic effort to try and get everything finished. And what's actually probably going to happen, if you're really unlucky, they'll also do a partial rewrite. And I've been in that situation before. Like, you know what this project that's running way, way behind needs? It needs us to start over. And that person's going to burn out straight away, and they're going to go like off sick or something, and then the whole, like, your productivity is just going to completely hit rock bottom, because now you've also got to deal with their partial rewrite that they just left at their backside whenever they went off, like burnout. And you might start to recover in a couple of weeks' time, but really your project's now on that slow decline to death, where it's just going to be quietly killed off because, it's ran way over time, way over budget. So there really isn't any kind of any shortcut apart from planning. So that's kind of like the end of my slides. I just want to reiterate a couple little things. Remember, try to figure out what success is for you. It makes things so much easier. Actually, if you're working on something that you enjoy, to get into that flow state. So figure out what you regard as success and try to work towards that. Find a company that will allow you to work towards that success, where you have team members that support you, that buy you squirrel t-shirts to give an ADHD talk in. Look after your spoons. And even if your brain doesn't tell you often enough that you rock, I think you do. So I'm Aaron Bassett. That's my Twitter handle. Our company Twitter handle's there as well. I don't think I'm going to have enough time for questions, unfortunately. I also know it can be a little bit awkward for people to ask questions anyway in a public forum about what is essentially a mental health talk. I am, however, going to be about for the rest of the conference, so we're going to be on a booth out there. Please come ask me any questions you want. If you want to go somewhere more private to ask me any mental health questions, I'm more than happy to get a coffee or a beer. If it's right after this talk, preferably a beer. I much prefer writing technical talks. These things are really difficult to give. But yeah, or hit me up. My DMs are open, so if you'd rather just not do it face-to-face and just want to send me a DM, I'm more than happy to answer questions that way as well. So yeah, Aaron Bassett has been my slightly disjointed talk about ADHD. Thank you very much.